I'm Nicole Danielle.
And I'm Megan Lee. And this is Romance on the Rocks, where two bookish biddies imbibe and talk about romance novels and their favorite authors. We have got the privilege today of speaking with one of our favorite writers, Heatherly Bell. Unbeknownst to me, Nicole had reached out to her, asked if she was willing to chat with us about her books, her writing process, her personal life, etc., and she said yes. Very awesome. Miss Bell's books seem to center around relatable characters with spunk, personality, redeemable qualities, and a dash of spice. She has been publishing books since 2010 in the romance genre and shows no signs of slowing down. She has written novels about pilots, firefighters, cowboys, and a slew of other blue-collar professions that make a gal swoon because we all love a partner who is good with his hands. I've personally read books from her Charming Texas series, her Heroes of Fortune Valley series, and her Sunset Kiss series. And Nicole, I think most recently, you have gotten to a book from her Men of Stone Ridge series, correct?
Yes, and I'm excited to read more about the Men of Stone Ridge moving forward.
They are cowboys, right?
Yes. Yeehaw!
Yeah. So, for anybody who's interested to hear from someone who isn't me or Nicole, the following recording will feature romance author Heatherly Bell. Enjoy. This is Heatherly Bell, and she wrote the best book I read last season for our podcast, which was A Charming Christmas Arrangement. I loved how relatable the characters were, and I loved the style of writing. And so Nicole was gracious enough to reach out to Miss Bell and ask if she would come on the podcast. So if you would like to just introduce yourself to our audience and tell them a little bit about yourself, that'd be great.
Okay, yeah. Thank you for having me, first of all. I really appreciate it. So I'm Heatherly Bell, and I write a little bit of mix. I write for Harlequin, which is the book that you're talking about, and I'm also an indie author, so I have different series from this one that I self-publish myself. But they're all very similar, I would say. They're all small town. They're all kind of humorous, but with somewhat serious subjects as well. And of course, they all have happily ever after.
They do. And I think you're right. It's that combination of the humor along with the serious subjects that makes them compelling, because I feel like the characters all have something that you can relate to. If it's a past trauma, relationships that, were strained, are strained, stressful situations that they're going through. It just, everybody seems to have something where you can go, I see myself there.
Yeah, I try for that. Thank you.
How did you become a romance novel writer? Where did that start?
Well, I've always liked to write. Initially, I've always read really widely. And so I would say I used to read anything from Stephen King and Dean Koontz all the way to Jodi Picoult. And when I started reading, maybe not Stephen King, but I always seemed to be very attracted to the romance subplot in the story, whatever it was. And so then I said, you know what? I really like this romance thing. So I started seeking out romance books, and it was a good mix that I was reading still. But I feel like the place where I belong is in romance because I always like a very hopeful story. So I started writing that way. And it took me quite a while to finish my first book. It probably took about 14 months to finish it, which I thought, I guess some people take a lot longer, but usually a shorter book like that shouldn't take quite as long, but I was just really struggling with it. So I went ahead, it took 14 months, and that's the longest it's ever taken me to write a book. And since then, I have a faster pace, fortunately. It was just a love of romance books that led me to become a writer.
So how long does a novel typically take you then? 14 months sounds quick. And maybe I would be overthinking everything. So 14 months doesn't sound long.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. It really doesn't. And I think it depends on the kind of book that you're writing, whether it requires a lot of research, things like that. So, but the book I was writing probably shouldn't have taken me that long. But it's your first time. I think you just kind of develop a muscle like anything else that you do frequently, it becomes a muscle that you work and it gets better and easier with time. So right now it takes me from 2 to 3 months to write a shorter book, the ones that I'm writing now for Harlequin. Although they have increased the word count, we started out at 55 and we went up to 60 and now we're at 70,000 words for these books. So it's a good story. You have a lot of room there to have some secondary characters, which can be a lot of fun.
That's actually one of Nicole's favorites. She loves
I
those
love secondary characters.
Yes. Yeah, me too. I remember when I first started writing that people would say, well, sorry, but the secondary characters are taking the spotlight away from the main characters. And I was like, gosh, so I guess what I have to do is make those secondary characters my main characters, sort of flip it around.
I found reading, the couple that I've read from the Charming series, I found that it's fun to see those secondary characters in the background and know that they've got either a novel coming up or have already been in a novel. And so if I'm intrigued, I can go find them. So having that kind of small town as your base for that, does it feel as though these folks in this town are real now? You've spent so much time with them and investing into their stories. How does that work, putting all of that into just like kind of that one town?
Right. I love doing that. I love putting in the secondaries and sort of saying, well, here's what they're doing now. But it's hard because you don't want them to take the story away from the main characters, and you always want every book to be kind of a standalone. So if people get it out of order, it will still make sense to them. But yeah, I mean, I just love putting them in there because they really do feel like family after a while. And like, I really do know them very well. That's why I think it's easier for me when I write another book in an already existing series. It's much easier for me to write that book than it is for me to write a brand new book in a completely new series with new characters. It's a lot more work, And speaking to the 14 months, I am working on something completely different, and it is taking me a long time. So yeah, it's taking me probably a good year to write this book.
Because you're writing it from the ground up.
Yeah, because it's a standalone with all kinds of new people. And it is hard because it's like you're creating this world. It's not the kind of world building that they have in fantasy romance, but it's still a world, a town you're building. And you want everybody to sort of have their own unique little quirks or twists so that you don't confuse them too much. But I do love it. I do feel like they're family. And I have a hard time not putting more of them in there, Okay, who am I going to talk about in this book from the earlier books? I try to bring them in, but I can't have them take the story over.
Right. Well, and speaking of that world building too, one of the things that really got me curious is you've got a lot of characters that have very technical backgrounds, pilots, you've got folks who were Marine Corps, you've got folks who are in firefighting. I mean, there's so much going on. How do you do that research to bring that kind of background alive where it feels as though obviously this is a real person doing this real job? It's not just like he's a firefighter and kind of glossing past it. There's some good details in there.
Wow, thank you. It's just research, yeah. Although, I will say that for the first book in that series, the one you have, Here's the Fortune Valley, I did go to a local regional airport that we have not far from me. And I talked to a pilot, and I got some just generalities about how they do things and what they do and some of the things they talk about. And I just got a feel for things, and I don't try to overload the books with information. I just kind of want to touch on the information. But I always wonder if I'm making it real, if I'm giving people enough. So thank you for telling me that, because I have no idea. I just do a lot of research and I try to understand what people are who love these things. So I'm flattered that you think it comes across real, because I always wonder. I probably make some mistakes, In fact, I did, I think a reviewer once upon a time caught a mistake I made it was a novella that I wrote as an offshoot of that Heroes of Fortune Valley series. And I had a female former military person, and I made a mistake of the timeline that it would have taken her to reach a level that she did. It's just, no, you can't do that. But very few people are going to know, all these things. So, but I happened to get somebody that was really on top of it, and she caught it.
Hey, but she was reading it. So that's good too, right?
Yeah, she read it. So that's good. I appreciate that.
Well, I felt like even reading Lucky Cowboy that the cowboys didn't seem like caricatures of cowboys. I felt like they seemed like very authentic, real working people. It didn't seem like a parody of a cowboy or something like that. You talked in the story about, actual ranch work and that type of thing. And so I'm like, oh, we're not just, riding on a horse, Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, my son and his wife actually own horses. So that really helps. Yeah, they have horses, and they have like a little ranch that it's actually a ranch in her family. So they don't own it, but they're allowed to, have the horses there. And so every once in a while I'll go out. If I have a question about something, I'll ask them. They're pretty good. They're not ranchers per se, but they can give me information. The other, I just really research. And when I wrote Nashville Cowboy, which is the second one, Eve is a vet. And so I actually talked to my friend who used to work with horses when I have a scene in which one of the horses has colic. And so I got details from her about the kind of things that they do when they have colic and stuff. So yeah, unfortunately, one of my son's horses died recently from colic. This is a very, very serious thing. I know.
Aww.
And I do put it in the book. And that is probably the main reason that horses will die is from colic. So.
Horses are very fragile. They've got so many things that can go wrong. I've not owned horses myself, but I've had enough friends with horses. When I hear the list of things that they are dealing with, I'm like, oh boy. Ooh. Yeah, it's a lot. Horses are very dedicated.
Yeah, so far they have only dealt with colic, so I'm hoping it's that way because one of the things is the vet bills are so expensive too.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy.
Well, that brings me to another question I wanted to ask that wasn't on a list of anything we sent to you. I wanted to know about pets in general, because I do see themes in your books about almost every character has got a cat or a dog, or they're kind of like convinced to adopt. There seems to be a theme of pets going on. So pets of your own, and how do you go about writing that into the books? Because I do think that's kind of a fun way to build a character.
Thanks. Yeah. I am totally a dog person. At the moment, we don't have any dogs. I mean, we had the kids, we had dogs all the time in the house. And the last one that we had to put down, I was like, it's just too much for me. It's so hard with elderly when they get elderly, and you see them kind of suffering and just having the ailments of old age, and it's just so hard. I really don't want to have another one. Not right now. I kind of want I basically am an empty nester because all my kids are adults and out of the house. So I kind of want to be an empty nester with pets as well. But we still have a cat because it seems like we always wind up with a pet in the house. And we like to say that our cat is he's more like a dog, And as an example, there was one time I was taking a walk with one of our dogs and he followed me along the entire way. But he walks himself, obviously, the cat. But yeah, I love that's a slice of life in our books. We all love our pets, whether we're dog people or cat people or horse people. But we at one time had a lot of dogs in the house. Okay, so each one of my kids has a dog. So when they come to visit, and my oldest and his wife have 4 dogs. And at one time they had 7.
Ooh, that's
that right. 7 dogs. And I was like, and he was all stressed all the time. And I'm like, that's a lot of pets to have. And eventually he kind of, they finally rehomed I guess it was about 3 of the dogs. So now they're down to 4. And for a while he was going through a program. So we kept his dog here and we kept him for about a year or more. So he was pretty much like our dog. So we very recently are just with the cat.
I was going to say recent empty nesters with the dog.
Recent. Yeah. And my daughter will bring over her 2 dogs when she comes a lot of times. So I'm never really, and the kids are telling us right now, you guys have to get a dog. You don't have one. You need a dog. I'm like, why do I need a dog? You guys bring your dogs over here all the time. I never feel like I don't have enough of that. And we can travel now a little bit easier without a dog. But I'm sure I will get another one at some point.
It looks like you've been very well traveled and have lived in a lot of different places too. What brought you to California?
What brought me to California basically was my dad. He was one of those early software engineers in the area that would become Silicon Valley. He was with IBM. And when we moved to this little town, it really wasn't called Silicon Valley, but it, grew up around us because we live in that San Jose, Palo Alto area, the Bay Area. So he came out here for that job, and I was like 18 or 19. So I was a little bit too immature to be on my own. I tried. We had lived in Maryland and I had all my friends there. So I did not really want to leave, but I wasn't quite ready to be on my own. So I came out here to join my family, and I've just never left, really.
Do you feel like that has helped with your writing? Because you place these towns in a lot of different states, having been all around. Do you feel like that has kind of given you that more, I don't know, openness to those kinds of spaces in your writing?
I think so. Yeah, I hope so. I do love so many different parts of the United States. I unfortunately haven't been able to live in Texas, and I won't because of the heat. I can't stand the heat anymore. But I do love Texas. I love the openness of Texas. I've written a few books in California as well. In fact, the first series, Fortune of Valiant, loosely based on the town that I live in, actually, at the moment, because it was called Fortune, and we have a lot of very wealthy people in this area. I'm not one of them, but it feels like this is a very sort of, wealthy area, I suppose. And so I was writing about people in that town, but they're not necessarily wealthy, but they live in that town. So, but I just kind of take little bits and pieces of different places that I've been, even if I've just passed through them. Sometimes you get a really good feel about a place and the people. And yeah, I just love writing about little towns, especially.
What book or what series do you feel like is your personal favorite? Like if you were going to move to one of these towns that you've written, what town would you move to?
Oh, wow, that's tough. I think I would probably pick Stone Ridge, Texas. That is, as a woman, that would probably be a good place to be.
I was going to say you'd be in like a special situation there, right? Because it's a minority selection of women. Yeah.
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 Yes. A lot of women, would do well in a town like that. I mean, even if you're an older woman, like it says in the book, they're going to look out for you from the time you're birth to the time you're 80, the men really look out for the women. And I actually kind of loosely based that series on inspiration from the Virgin River books from that Robin Carr does, and that went to Netflix. I wanted to have a little town like that was, you had that good feeling about the people looking out for each other and taking care of each other. So I think that'd be a really great place to live if I had to move. I think I'd like it.
That sounds lovely. Do you have any books sitting on your nightstand right now that are maybe something that you would like to recommend to any of our listeners out there?
Well, I don't have anything sitting on my nightstand right now, but I have recently started reading, believe it or not, she's a British author, Sophie Cousins, and I find that I really love her books. They're very funny and uplifting, and I like to read things that when I finish reading, I feel like, oh gosh, good, thank you, yes, good ending. Sometimes, I feel like I almost have to read ahead. So, are you not going to give me a happy ending? Because this is not looking good so far. But
I do find that's the hardest part about novels is if you've enjoyed most of it and then you get to that last chapter and you're like, there's no way they can wrap this up in a way that's going to make me happy.
Yeah. It's like, come on, hurry up, wrap this up. So the last one that I read from her was, is she really going out with him?
Yes.
Yeah. And I loved that book. I really did. That's the one I was telling you that I wasn't sure whether they were going to get together at the end. So I was like, I think I may have read ahead or something just to make sure. Okay, then I will experience the rest of this. I mean, I don't mind experiencing all this, ups and downs and heartache and stuff as long as I'm just going to wind up in a good place. That's life.
It is, isn't it? I don't know. Every day's an adventure.
Yeah.
So I've always wondered, how do you choose the names for your characters? And
I was just about to ask the same thing.
I wonder that about every author. When I see the names, I'm like, is there like a name board that's sitting in your house? Is it just like divine intervention? Like, where are these coming from?
At this point, I try to think of names I haven't used before, and it's really getting hard, I looked at my books and I said, okay, you have too many Jack. No more Jack. So I did have a list of names, but it was just the ones that are already in my book. I try not to repeat them too often, but certain names are just really strong names. Like Jack is a very strong name. What was the other name? I do, like I said, I try to give my men my heroes very strong names. And then for the women, I try to just find a name that isn't too popular, but is still a well-known name, just names that I like the sound of. And sometimes I do look at the regional type of stuff. Like this book, the last three in the Charming Texas, or the latest three in the Charming Texas, the first one was Her Fake Boyfriend. And the guy in that book is Irish American, and his name is Finn. And I was thinking, it just came out of the blue. Sometimes these names just come out of the blue for me. Or maybe I'll read a book by a favorite author and find an obscure kind of name in there. Oh, let's bring back Finn. Or let's bring back Noah, just names that I feel are nice and solid names. So when I picked Finn, I said, okay, so what other Irish American names do I have? So I did do like a little search for regional names and came up with Declan being one of them, who's going to be the hero in the next book. And then Ronan is the next guy. So there are two brothers and a cousin. So I made the mistake of only having two brothers. So I said, let's just make this one a cousin. So
that works.
Yeah, no, readers really love books with brothers. So I was trying to do something good for the readers. So let's just have another. He's not a brother, but he is as close as a brother. So they grew up together and they're cousins. So
I think it's that connecting part, you get that connection where somebody already feels connected to that main character. So if you bring in a cousin, they're like, clearly we're going to love him as well.
Yes. Yeah. And I think those are really strong names, but again, I had to look them up, and there were other Irish names, but those just really jumped out at me as sounding kind of strong, and I always try to pick those kind of names. I'm never going to pick a name that just doesn't sound like a hero's name, right? And I don't want to say a name right now because I don't want to make anybody feel bad. But yeah, they're just some names that just don't really sound like a strong name. It doesn't mean that the person isn't a good person and a strong person. That's the name,
I just, when we've been reading a lot of the backs of different romance novels as we're trying to pick out books for our upcoming episodes, sometimes we just giggle so much at the names that people have chosen. And I'm like, where did that come from? It just like some big, long, made up, feather bottom stone hammer. And I'm like, what is this?
That's funny. Yeah. I mean, I think my names are all very names of people that you would meet on the street. And so like
people who would be your neighbors.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But there are some odd names out there. I will grant you that.
Do you have like any special setup where you do your best writing? Is there like a space that is your happy space for writing?
You know what? I think it's going to be my office where I am in right now. But in the past, I haven't been the kind of writer who has only one place where they can write. I would just write everywhere in the house. I have laptops, so I'll take it with me downstairs. Sometimes I'll be on the couch. The TV is on and I'm writing. For a while when the weather was good, we have a little patio and I would go outside under the umbrella and bring my laptop. It gets a little hard because of the glare, but
Sure.
it's nice to be outside sometimes. But right now, I really like my office, and I'm trying to make it a place where it's just books everywhere, bookish things to kind of encourage me. But one of the things that I have really found, it's not so much the place, but almost the sounds. So I have a favorite YouTube music, or it's not really music, it's sounds, and it's rainy sounds in a coffee shop. And so it's like an hour or 2 hours of this. And somehow I think it's because you almost train your brain this way. But somehow when I put that on, I'm pretty productive. So I'll be in my office where I can now close the door. It's pretty nice. And I can just turn that music on and I am really productive. It just works with my brain, I guess.
I completely understand that. I will put on those same kinds of videos. Usually mine will have some kind of rain, but it'll also have a little bit of classical music and like the Pomodoro timing. I don't know if you do any of the ones with the timing in it where it gives you like, a half an hour, stand up and move your legs and now sit back down and write again. That kind of stuff.
Yeah, I've done those, definitely.
Yeah, I like that. So any advice for aspiring writers?
I think just write a lot and write what you love. And we had a thing called the internal editor that kind of sits on your shoulder and just sits there critiquing everything you write. I'm like, that's not good. Nope, start over. That's not good. Don't do that. You have to just banish that person and just throw her away and say, I'm going to write what I want to write. Just let it all go. It's almost like your subconscious is working. Like you kick out your conscious mind that says you can't do this or you're not very good at this, and just kick her to the curb and just let your subconscious take over. When I first started doing this, I said, I think my subconscious is a better writer than my conscious person is, because I don't have any roadblocks that I'm putting up and I just throw it all out there. But I do admit that I think it's good to have a little bit of a roadmap. I'm not saying somebody should just sit down and just write whatever. You should probably have a little bit of a roadmap, like, okay, what am I going to write about? Am I going to write about a woman who's starting over, and so she moves to a small coastal town, and starts up a business? What am I going to write about? And then, depending on the kind of writer you are, I'm more of a discovery writer sometimes. So I'd be halfway through the book sometimes before I realize who these people really are. And then I say, oh, that's why she behaves this way. And oh, that's why. And of course, then that's what a first draft is for, right? Because I always can go back later and layer all that stuff in, just hints as to kind of the person that she is and why she would do something like this,
Do you usually have the happy ending already, like something that you're aiming for? Do you kind of already know how the characters are going to be together in the end so that you can kind of bring that all together? Or is that also part of the discovery process?
Well, because I write romance, I know they're going to wind up together right at the end. So that's kind of easy. But what's not easy and what's always difficult for me is finding that dark moment when it seems like they're not going to be together and then trying to find a way to get them together. So no, I don't always know that. It's not fully a discovery because usually I know what the issues are that are keeping them apart, what issue this person has. So Adam and Stacy's, it's pretty obvious that he has a fear of losing someone that he loves again, right? And she has a fear of being second to somebody because of what happened with her ex. Her ex-husband went off with his first wife, who he still had a thing for.
Mm-hmm.
So she's thinking, well, I've got the ghost of this woman that Adam loved in our life. And so she's having a hard time with that. So I knew that their dark moment had to be something relating to that, And she had to come to the realization that, why don't you listen to what he's saying? He's saying that he wants to be with you and that he's wanting to have this new life with you instead of like stuck in his grief or in the past type of thing. I know that's one of the books where my editor said, I really wasn't sure how you were going to bring these people together.
I thought you did a masterful job, so it was appreciated.
Megan and I were actually talking before we started the recording that the challenges that your characters are trying to overcome is very realistic. When I was reading Lucky Cowboy, I was telling her that Lincoln He really resembles in a lot of ways my husband and then my sister's boyfriend. He's kind of a crabby guy. My husband is totally a crabby guy sometimes.
Yeah.
And then in a different regard, he had a lot of challenges with like being able to tell Sadie that he loved her, which is a huge problem that my sister's boyfriend had for a long time because he saw divorced parents and he wasn't sure what love really meant. And now today he was like, "Oh, I love you." And I was like, "It's just like Lucky Cowboys."
Right. So, well, hopefully, of course, this is a book, so it has to be dramatic, but hopefully he didn't have to face almost losing her to realize that he loved her. Because that's what our stubborn Lincoln had to do, realize, oh my gosh, I might really lose this person, and so, yeah, I obviously love this person.
I just love that with your characters. It's so realistic. The dialogue is realistic. The challenges they face is realistic. It's not stuff that is lofty or lives in some magical fairy tale romance world. It's everyday love, if that makes sense. And I just really appreciate it personally.
Thank you. Yeah, I do strive for that. And I think one of the things I get compliments on the most is my dialogue. And I think that's because I talk so much. And I always listen too. I listen to a lot of conversations. So yeah, and I feel like dialogue should really express who somebody is more than relaying information,
So Heatherly, how did you get your first book published?
The one with Harlequin, you mean? My first book with Harlequin? Yeah. So it was kind of a long circuitous route. I think I wrote this book based on a dream that I had, and I really don't recommend doing that because it made it really difficult in the end because I had to construct this plot. It was, you have the little seed of an idea and then you realize, oh, this is going to be really hard because there's a lot more that has to come into it. So I wrote this book from start to finish, and then I tried to find an agent for it because it was a longer book than Harlequin usually takes, but they had the super romance line at that time, which was much bigger, meatier books. And I had not had any luck getting in with Harlequin without an agent, so I decided I'll just try with an agent. Back when Twitter was a thing, they used to have these Twitter pitches, and you would get to pitch like one line idea. And agents would sort of respond to that and say, yeah, I'd like to see more or whatever. So I did that, and I wound up with this one agent, Dawn Dottle with Blue Ridge Agency. She has since passed away, unfortunately, but she liked it and said, let's work together. And she went out on submission, and I wound up with Harlequin, which I was really kind of surprised because it was sort of a long circuitous route. Harlequin, you don't have to have an agent to submit to them. So I had submitted to them in the past, but sometimes a book has to wind up on the desk of an editor that really loves it. And I was fortunate enough to have that happen. And that was my first book that I had published with Harlequin. And they like to do series a lot. So they said, okay, well, come up with 2 more books. And so I had to sort of like, okay, yeah. So there's guess what? There's 2 more pilots. So let's do this thing. And these pilots are in the town. And, sometimes you just have to think very quickly and get creative. And I was fortunate enough that they bought the 3-book series. And then shortly after that 3rd book was published, Super Romance closed the line. So I was like, oh, okay, this is not good. I was working on another proposal for another book. So I said, okay, well, what are we going to do here? Because they moved me to special edition, which is where I am right now. Mm-hmm. And the books were going to be shorter. I had a new editor. It was a challenge because here I am. I'm coming from writing these really long books to writing much shorter. And you would think that it'd be easier to write shorter, but not necessarily. I remember the first book that I wrote for a special edition, the editor was saying, oh, well, I think there's a problem here with pacing. Yeah, no surprise, because I'm kind of like used to writing this longer book. So I think she says, I think we already know why these people shouldn't be together. Now let's put them together. Okay. All right, I get it. Be quicker about this. So then I moved into special edition. I was very fortunate to be able to move into special edition because There was a lot of super romance authors that never got another contract. They are still trying to get another contract. I just was fortunate that my editor really, really liked me, and she wanted to put me somewhere else. So that's where I've been.
I love that you started with Harlequin, though, because I feel like even as a reader, when you start reading romance, I feel like those Harlequins are the ones you start with because your mom has them, your grandma has them, like they're at your best friend's house, they're by the checkout line, they're just everywhere. So everybody's got kind of that soft spot in their heart for like that first Harlequin romance that they read. Yeah. So I love that.
It's true. And Harlequin was really for years the name in romance, until other people came along. So, but they're still hanging in there.
They are. They are. I know I read on your threads, you've been talking about really getting into like the slow burn romances right now.
Yeah. Well, that was the book I was reading. Is She Really Going Out with Him? Because that was pretty slow burn for sure. And a lot of her books are like that. But I find that I love it because I'm not huge on spicy. Obviously, I don't write super spicy, but I'm more about the emotional connection between two people. And I think when you have a slow burn, that's what's happening. Maybe people don't notice it, but it's happening. These people are really getting to know each other and they're really falling in love before they fall into bed for a reason. So that's what I like about it. And also, I think I said in that same post that it's sort of like not immediately looking at a guy and thinking he's gorgeous. And that's important too. Granted, you're probably going to find something attractive about this person, but it's, you're just not like, oh gosh, he's gorgeous right away and I have to have him. And it's sort of like a slow learning of, wow, look what he looks like without a shirt. Whoa, I never thought of that before. And that kind of a thing. It's sort of like an awareness that's a gradual awareness. I think it's more real, too, for the most part.
Yeah, paying more attention to the emotions.
And I think Megan and I definitely agree with that because there have been some books we've been reading for the podcast where I'm like, they've been together for 3 days. There's no way they're that in love.
That's true, yeah. That is true. You just sometimes... I get it. Sometimes it does happen fast. But if it happens fast, then you have to show me why it happens fast. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And that's been our issue with some of the books is I'm like, I just don't understand why these two are together. I don't see the commonality other than he's handsome. She's pretty. I'm like,
I want it to be more than just a superficial thing,
Exactly. Which kind of brings us around to the question. Nicole and I have been rating all of these books on what we're calling our spicy Scoville scale. And you were just saying you don't write incredibly spicy. So on our Scoville scale, like the top one is Carolina Reaper. And I'm going to say your books are not in the Carolina Reaper category. They're further down the list, but they are above Milk and Green Pepper, which has been kind of our sad ones down in the bottom. And I think Nicole and I kind of feel that yours are hovering at that like jalapeno-ish, kind of in the middle. Yeah. But, I wanted to know from your perspective, if you were poblano, jalapeno, or habanero, like, are you feeling like anywhere in that particular part of the scale?
I'm thinking of, what's the one that, so I'm thinking of my peppers here. Jalapeno's pretty spicy.
It's middling for our scale, at least. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I would say jalapeno then, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I feel like we're all in agreement then. Okay.
I feel like Lucky Cowboy was like almost habanero, but definitely jalapeno.
Yeah, absolutely true.
Jalapenos can kind of go either way depending on, what part of the season you're getting them out of the field. So, you got that.
True. Very true. I would say that. But, a rating scale of spicy just really is so subjective and it really depends on who you're talking to, know. Like, I would say, the way I say it is, my mother thinks my books are way too spicy. She's like, oh no, way too spicy. And, but most people, what? Not enough spice for me. So I would say sometimes it's low and mostly medium,
Yeah.
Mostly medium.
I agree. It is completely subjective, which is why we kind of wanted to ask you your feelings on it, because now that we've read some of the books and it's like, oh, well, this is how I perceive it. But coming from the author, like, where does that fall? But it feels like, yeah, kind of in that middling ground. So, which for me is my preference. Like, I don't want something that's so boring that they've never held hands. And I don't want something where I hear about all the grotesque details of what's going on in their bedroom. So I like the middle ground.
Yeah, I do too. I really do. It feels like a comfortable place to be. It's also language too, what the language that you use to talk about certain parts of the anatomy.
Yep.
And depending on what word you use, it changes the flavor of the book and the tone and also probably the spiciness, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a very valid point, and I haven't actually thought about that before. But yeah, the language and the terminology, for sure.
Everybody receives those words a little bit differently. Like some words that I might find to be like, oh, that's really sexy. Somebody else might be like, ugh, don't say that.
Yeah, exactly. Very true.
So do you have some projects that you're working on right now that you want to kind of maybe tell us about or steer us toward, like something recently published that we should all go out and read or something we should be looking for on the horizon?
Right. Well, I would say the most recently published book is the Mavericks Christmas Countdown, which came out in November. And that was a really fun book to write because it was a fake relationship between two friends, and it was set at Christmas time, and it's a fun book. And then I have the X Next Door is the next charming Texas book coming out in July, and I just shared the cover recently. So, and that is a fun book because it's one of the Irish brothers,
not the cousin. It's the brother.
Not the cousin. The cousin is coming out. The cousin will come out as it's a Christmas book, so it'll come out later this year too.
Perfect.
But I don't even have a title for that book yet. I call it, my placeholder title is A Christmas Rescue.
I love the Christmas one. So far, apparently that's what I'm mostly gravitating toward, which is so funny because Nicole and I have had the discussion. I'm not like a Hallmark movie person at all. So I think it's funny that the ones I'm reading that I've loved the most is the Christmas ones. That's been really fun to discover about myself.
Yeah, I try to make every third book that I write a Christmas book. And they're fun to write because you've got so much already in the setting, There's so much. It's all this things you see. Everything is just so bright and colorful. There's so much to see. There's so much to hear with all the music. There's so much to smell. It's a perfect setting.
All right, Nicole, do you have anything else that you wanted to ask? I only have like one last question that I want to ask.
Heatherly, what's a fun fact your readers might not know about you?
I guess it would be that I really started off wanting to be a singer in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And so I was just, it was the 80s, and probably before you guys were born.
Oh, no. We were around.
But I was out there and I was like trying to be Pat Benatar, and I was in bands and we played around the Bay Area, but it never took off for me. But that is one thing. And I have been told I'm a pretty good singer. So
are there mixtapes out there? Are there CDs out there? Is there anything we can track down that you would be on?
I have them. I don't think there's anything out there, but
it's too bad.
We have them. We have the tracks and the tapes and everything here at home.
I'm super into music as well. I grew up with a dad who was always playing in bands and, grew up in the choir, and my husband and I have a music project we work on together. So
that's cool.
I love that. I love that. You should get back out there.
I guess I should. That's kind of how I met my husband. He was at a party when I was singing in this band, and he was the sound engineer they brought in. And so that's how we met. He's a drummer, but he also plays the bass. So he's never let it go. He's got one of our spare rooms is called the music room.
we have everything in the studio. So yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I can't really get away from it, nor should I,
No, you shouldn't.
It is fun. I love music. I don't listen to it while I'm writing because it's too distracting for me. I'm going to totally start singing or clapping along. I can't. It takes away my focus completely. So that's why I have to have like rain. Those kinds of sounds work better for me.
That makes sense.
So another one on my list here. On your bio, it says that you drink copious amounts of coffee, you crave cupcakes, and occasionally wear real pants. How do you like your coffee? What's your favorite cupcake flavor? And what's your favorite comfy outfit to wear?
Well, I'll start with comfy outfit, and it's either my jammies or a yoga pants. Those are comfortable. They're stretchy, and just a sweatshirt or whatever. That's my comfy outfit to write in. And I kind of think I'd live my life in yoga pants if I could, but that's not realistic. I don't. Cupcakes, my goodness. I mean, I don't discriminate. I love every type of cupcake there is. I don't get to eat them enough anymore because I have to cut back on my sugar. But I would be something with salted caramel filling and maybe even the frosting. I love salted caramel. My coffee has to have some cream, but I don't take sugar. But also, we're very picky here about our coffee. Lately, we just have Peets, and we won't do anything but Peets. So we're very picky with our coffee.
Nothing wrong with that. Nothing at all.
It's got to be strong for me. It's got to be strong.
Oh, yeah. None of this water, this brown water.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You know what? I was trying to get more into tea, but tea just feels like brown water to me most of the time, and tastes that way. But I was trying to get into it a little bit more just to expand my horizons. And the funny thing is, I posted on Threads that I was interested in learning about teas or how can I get to liking tea better than I do. It was probably my most popular thread I've done. I had like 800 responses.
Wow.
And found that people are really passionate about their tea.
Yeah, there's a passionate tea community, a passionate coffee community, and there are some crossovers. I will do both, but I'm more with you on the copious amounts of coffee. I mean, I go through way too much in a day. The doctor asked me how many cups, and I went, 2? And that was...
I don't think that was honest, Meg.
Al, you didn't see the size of the cup.
Yes, I'm trying to cut back on coffee too. And I'm one of those people that can't have coffee too late in the day, or I swear I'll be up all night.
That's me for sure. I can't have it past noon or it's all over.
Oh, no. This girl's still drinking coffee way late at night.
It doesn't affect you the same way. My husband's the same way. He can drink a cup of coffee right before he goes to bed. It won't affect him.
Yeah, same. I could just intravenous that kind of stuff. Good to go. Well, all right. My very last question then, Nicole, unless you had anything else. No, I would like you to have the platform here to just tell everybody where we can find you, online, and maybe any upcoming events you have, if you've got book signings or if you're attending any cons or anything like that. Where can people find you?
I will be at Book Lovers Con in May, which is happening in Las Vegas. I believe it's May 15th. And you can find me just about anywhere. I'm on Threads, I'm on Pinterest, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Heather.
Yeah, I was so delighted to have you on, and it has just been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah,
I really love it. I love to hear that people read and enjoyed my book. So, because I don't get to hear that very often. So,
we said you're criminally unrepresented or underrepresented in our library. So
my library too. I was like, where is Heatherly?
I'm going to have a word with the librarian. I think that's what's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, my self-published books are on Ingram, so they should be able to order them. I tried to make sure they were on Ingram. So I think sometimes you have to ask them, bring in the ISBN number and ask them to put it in there. Yeah.
I volunteer with my local library, so I'll see if I can strong arm them into
Thank you.
Some titles.
I appreciate that.
Very good.
So, Nicole, was that the best?
It was amazing.
I was kind of starstruck, and hopefully I didn't come across totally stiff and frightened, because that is a little bit how I felt. But we got through it, and she was lovely.
She was. She was a joy.
If any of you in the audience haven't had the opportunity to read any of Miss Bell's work, I do highly recommend checking them out. And she has a new book slated to drop in July for the Charming Texas series. It's called The X Next Door. I've got it in my Ripped Bodice cart right now because it is currently available for pre-order. And if you use our affiliate link on the Romance on the Rocks podcast website, man, that's a mouthful, Romance on the Rocks podcast website, it can help support all the work we put into the recordings. And I know Nicole has been working really hard on getting our affiliate links to be a little more prominent on the website, and hopefully in like the podcast show notes as well. But if you do need help finding your way over to Ripped Bodice links or our Amazon affiliate links, please reach out, let us know. If you do click on anything on our website, you don't even have to buy the book you clicked on. Anything you buy during that visit actually helps the podcast. So that's kind of cool too.
Yes.
You can go in and you can click on Dark of the Moon, or you can click on The Accidental Kiss, or you can click on those and go ahead and buy socks or a notebook or
on
whatever.
Amazon? Yeah, on Amazon, not on the Ripped Bodice. Yeah.
If you start there, anything you buy counts. But on Ripped Bodice, like I said, they have got the book The X Next Door ready to purchase for pre-order. And then one more plug for Miss Bell. Heatherly is incredibly active on Instagram. She has a great newsletter that she shares, and I definitely recommend giving her a follow on both Instagram and Facebook page so you can get access to that newsletter. Just another thank you to Miss Bell for honoring us with her presence and the interview. It was a pleasure. So thank you for joining us today for Romance on the Rocks. Please like, subscribe, and follow. And if you are a hopelessly romantic fellow bookish biddy like us, think about giving us a review on Apple iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and wherever you catch your podcasts. Your support really means the world to us. So until next time, stay safe and know that you are loved.